Sure seems like things are heating up between five-star center Jayden Quaintance and the Missouri Tiger basketball team. Plus, I'm going to make the case for Sam Horn as your Missouri starting quarterback coming up right now on Locked On Mizzou.
You are Locked On Mizzou, your daily podcast on the Missouri Tigers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, all you true sons and daughters, I'm John Miller, your Mizzou mafioso and the central scrutinizer of Missouri Tigers football and basketball. And today's episode is brought to you by Bird Dogs. Go to birddogs.com/lockedoncollege or enter promo code LockedOnCollege for a free white tech hat with any purchase. You won't want to take your Bird Dogs off, we promise you. And here's what I promise you today, some more exciting news on the basketball court here, potentially. Well, we've been talking a lot about future casts here lately on the program. If you're unfamiliar, this is when the experts, the recruiting experts over at Rivals.com, well, they put their reputation on the line and say, hey, here's where I'm predicting a young man is going to attend college basketball. And I don't take it lightly, especially when the national director of basketball recruiting over at Rivals puts in a future cast, and that's Rob Cassidy. Well, just today, Rob put in a future cast for Jayden Quaintance. Now, I've talked a little bit about Jayden on the program here if you're an everydayer, but Jayden Quaintance is a five-star center, maybe the second or third ranked center in the entire country, depending on who you look at. And that's based on him reclassifying, by the way, to the 2024 class. This is a young man who just turned 16 years old last month in July. So a guy with tremendous upside and a lot of untapped potential, clearly at that age. But again, if you're an everydayer, this is old news to you. But also, he's kind of like Jonte Porter, too, because in that he reclassified. Well, because this young man, Jayden Quaintance, is so young, he's going to have to spend 2 years in college, in theory. So, yes, indeed, if let's say he goes to Missouri, in theory, he could transfer somewhere else for his sophomore season, or he could spend a year with Overtime Elite or one of those G League squads. Okay, maybe that could happen, but it seems more likely that he would probably play a couple years at Missouri. And by the way, Missouri, not only would they have him for a couple years, he's a guy, despite his age, I think would be an instant impact player. You look at his profile, his body size, he doesn't look like a guy who was 15 years old just a short months ago. You know, I think he can do damage from what I've seen inside around the basket for sure, but I don't think there's any question he's not going to be a traditional post-up big man like Peyton Marshall, for instance, who Missouri already has as a part of its 2024 class. He's shown a willingness to shoot a three-pointer. Not sure how effective he's been at that. Not sure how much that even matters. Again, we're watching a guy who was 15 years old for the most part here. He's obviously so young, but with an athletic profile and a skill set that's obviously incredibly impressive. He doesn't play like a 16-year-old. He doesn't move like a 16-year-old guy who's 6'10". That's really the most impressive part about it. He can obviously be a menace defensively. I think offensively, there's just so much untapped potential there. Obviously, the national recruiting analysts are seeing it as well. 24/7 has him ranked very similarly. And oh, by the way, I was looking at those center rankings. Just interestingly enough, I said he ranks third over at 24/7, that being Jayden Quaintance. Well, fourth, none other than John Bowl, who Missouri fans are probably quite familiar with. He ultimately spurned Missouri to go join Ole Miss. But again, just yet another impressive guy to be getting on campus at the very least. You're talking about a top 15 type player for what is already looking like an excellent recruiting class for Missouri. Missouri very much still in on Anor Boateng if I'm pronouncing his name correctly, a top 25 5-star type kid from Little Rock, Arkansas. I mean, you add him and Jayden Quaintance to the class. I mean, you're looking at maybe the greatest recruiting class in the history of Missouri basketball on paper. I mean, that's unbelievable. You're talking about a top 3, maybe even number 1 class in the country with 5 guys. It really could happen, folks. So this is pretty astonishing, really. And by the way, did I mention? I don't think I did. It wasn't just Rob Cassidy. No, there was a second guy, just a few, maybe within the past hour or so, very recently, Jackson Collier, who's listed as a basketball recruiting analyst over at Rivals. Well, he put in a future cast to Missouri for Jayden Quaintance as well. So the word on the street, at the very least, is the Tigers are the leaders for Quaintance at the very least. And my goodness, Dennis Gates, whoo, hose me down. This is an exciting time to be a Missouri basketball fan. Feel like I've been saying it a lot, but you know what? I like saying it. And speaking of recruiting, with all the excitement going on right now around the 2024 basketball recruiting class, I don't want people to forget about this upcoming Missouri basketball season either, because despite the fact that, well, there aren't as many 4 or 5-star, top 100 guys in that class, I'm incredibly excited about this team. And one of the reasons is Trent Pierce, quite honestly, the true freshman on this upcoming squad. I think if there was one takeaway from the Jamaica trip that you sort of heard from the players and the coaches, just word on the street kind of thing here too, is that Trent Pierce is going to be really good. And I think if you thought Aiden Shaw last season, obviously Missouri brought him, that true freshman, along slowly. I think Shaw has a good chance to have a breakout season in his sophomore year with the Tigers. But I don't think Pierce is going to be brought along as slowly. I just think his offensive game is really, really advanced for his age. And the fact that he's grown, by the way, to reportedly upwards of 6'10" as a small forward, man, he is a really interesting piece with a good handle, a good jump shot. I'm really excited to see what Trent Pierce can do. And potentially, by the way, with all that long arms and his athletic body, he's going to be a problem defensively potentially too, once he sort of figures out that end of the court. That will probably, like most freshmen, will need some work. But I think offensively, the moment Trent Pierce steps onto the court, he's going to be a problem offensively. I think he's going to be one of Missouri's best scorers this coming year. And, of course, we are 8 days away, believe it or not, from the kickoff of the Missouri football season. Forgive me for leading with basketball there under these circumstances. But you know what? I love my babies equally, and I just was really, really excited for that Jayden Quaintance news, or at least that information drip there. I hope you like that drip as well. But you know what? Forget about the Ric Flair drip. We got some other things to talk about, like Sam Horn. Hey, how about this kid? He's pretty freaking talented, right? I know I've said Brady Cook. If I had to guess week 3, who's going to start? I guess today I would say Brady Cook, but I'm not exactly convinced of that. I'm not exactly betting the house on it, that type of deal. So you know what? Let's make the case for Sam Horn coming right up. But first, I want to tell you about Bird Dogs, because finally there's a stretch khaki short that is truly worthy of my sculpted legs. Yes, the Bird Dog shorts, they're the best way to go for sure. They frankly do the exact same thing as Lululemon, but they fit even better than that for a cheaper price. And by the way, forget about shorts that are made of stiff, restricting cotton. And when it's this hot, you don't want all that fabric anyway. You want to be dry. You want to be comfortable. Well, that's what Bird Dogs has to offer. So go to birddogs.com/lockedoncollege or enter the promo code LockedOnCollege for a free white tech hat with your order. That's birddogs.com/lockedoncollege or enter promo code LockedOnCollege at checkout for a free white tech hat. You won't want to take your Bird Dogs off. We promise you. Thanks, as always, for making Locked On Mizzou your first listen every day. Everydayers, tomorrow on the program, well, we better strike while the iron's hot defensively in 2023 because, man, you look toward next year, a 2024 defense is looking really thin on paper. So let's talk about that on tomorrow's program. But right now I want to talk about Sam Horn because, number one, while consistently I've said that, hey, if I got to go leader in the clubhouse here, who's starting week 3 against Kansas State? Well, I'd pick Brady Cook. But I don't want anybody, first of all, to get the impression that means that I don't like Sam Horn. In fact, I've been a fan of Sam Horn since he signed with Missouri. Very impressed with his athletic profile. And speaking of his athletic profile, I think it's pretty safe to say that he does have the best athletic profile on the team. Now, I understand that Jake Garcia has a great arm too, but Horn is more mobile than Garcia, certainly from what the statistics showed for Garcia last season at Miami. He was not much of a runner whatsoever. Now, perhaps Horn isn't as good of a runner as Brady Cook, but I wouldn't say he's too far off either. Again, this is what I've seen from high school from Sam. Obviously, we haven't seen much, if anything, from Sam in terms of college football at this point. He certainly hasn't scrambled to my knowledge. If he did it once, well, maybe I forgot, but I'm pretty sure we just had, one pass that counted and one that didn't last year against New Mexico State. Some would also argue that, well, maybe we've seen what Brady Cook has to offer. I'm not so sure about that. I'm really not. I am curious, I have to admit, to see what Brady Cook would do with a full season, a full healthy season, most importantly. But put all that aside. Life is not fair. Maybe last season truly is going to be Brady Cook's only opportunity to be the starter. We'll see. A full season, that is. But I will say this. While I do like Brady Cook as a young man, I'd love to see him ball out for the Tigers this year. If it indeed becomes obvious by week 3 that Sam Horn is the best quarterback option on this Missouri roster because of Sam Horn, by the way, not because Brady Cook struggles, but because Sam Horn takes the job by a stranglehold and just owns it, well, that can only be viewed as a positive, in my opinion, if you're a Missouri fan. Because, again, he has the highest ceiling on the roster, just in my opinion. I understand some of you will push back and say, well, actually, Jake Garcia was ranked higher coming out of high school. I don't care. I really don't. At this point, when you've seen Garcia play, he's had his games. He's had his shot at the University of Miami. I understand you'll say, hey, things fell apart around him at Miami. At a certain point, if you're an above-average player, if you're certainly a great quarterback, you have that kind of potential, you need to be able to lift the situation around you up a little bit at a certain point. But regardless, I think more to the point, if that were all true, if Garcia was just looking for a better opportunity, we should have seen more out of him. We should have heard more out of him in spring. He had every opportunity to win that job with Cook and Sam Horn, both relatively sidelined with injuries. I know Cook missed all of spring practice. He didn't scrimmage or anything like that. Horn missed a lot of time, too, with his elbow injury that he sustained during baseball. But now that, again, Horn is a full go, everything seems fine. Cook also a full go. Listen, I'm not really rooting for anybody personally. If anything, I'm kind of rooting for the kid who grew up as a Missouri fan in Brady Cook, just because, well, it's easy for me to see myself in that sort of thing. But just because Sam Horn is from Georgia, well, that doesn't mean we're not rooting for him either. And let's not forget that Brad Smith was from Ohio and Chase Daniel was from Texas, and those guys are absolute Missouri legends. So all this, where's he from, who did he root for growing up stuff, it's a cute story, it's a relatable story, but ultimately means absolutely nothing. And if Sam Horn is great, by God, Missouri fans are going to love him forever. And, of course, with Williams Nwaneri committing to Missouri, one of the best, if not the best, defensive players rated in the entire country, it kind of flew under the radar the last couple days when Jaylen Brown, a defensive end from the state of Alabama, committed to the Tigers. He's an interesting prospect, just a 3-star guy, I suppose, with notable offers from Houston and Maryland. And I talked a lot about Sam Horn's athletic profile. Well, I like this young man's athletic profile too. At 6'6", 230 pounds. I know Coach Peoples particularly believes in this young man, according to Jaylen's quotes, says he really likes his explosion off the ball. And, well, I just think he's an interesting prospect, really long-armed kid who, if he develops into his body, gets the type of coaching that he needs, could really be a problem on the edge at a certain point. Definitely some SEC schools started kicking around, but Jaylen visited Missouri in late July, and now within about a month has committed to Missouri. So sounds like a solid commitment there, and rounding out what's getting to be a much improved class, obviously, with Nwaneri on board. You get Ryan Wingo on board. Now suddenly you're talking about a class that shoots up probably 10 spots in the rankings, certainly from where it originally was, maybe even more than that. So anyway, good news again. I like this prospect. I think he's pretty interesting, especially for a guy who's flying under the radar and just starting to get interest from South Carolina, maybe some other schools. I think Jaylen Brown could be a bit of a diamond in the rough on that Missouri defensive front in the coming years. And, since we are getting so close to kickoff here, well, I guess there's going to be real games here on Saturday, right? Notre Dame and Navy, correct me if I'm wrong, is probably the most notable game. I think the Southern Cal Trojans are kicking off their season as well, but a shockingly low amount of player props right now in college football, even from a prominent guy like Luther Burden. Come on, FanDuel Sportsbook, help us out here. But you know what? One of my colleagues, I suppose, had some over-unders for Luther Burden. So finally somebody gives me some numbers to argue about. So I do want to talk about that coming up, but also I want to tell you that this episode is brought to you by BetterHelp. And sometimes when we're faced with tough life choices, the path forward is not obvious at all, whether we're talking about your career, relationships, how to connect with your kids, anything like that. Sometimes life is a little bit easier to navigate when you've got somebody to talk to, literally just somebody to bounce ideas off of. I can just tell you from experience, working in a virtual company like this at Locked On, well, sometimes it can feel a little bit lonely. So I can totally see the value in talking to somebody at BetterHelp about just my occupation, my career, all types of choices you got to think about all the time. Hey, let therapy be your map with BetterHelp. So visit BetterHelp.com/LockedOnCollege today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/LockedOnCollege. Well, like the rest of us on the Mizzou beat, Gerard Hamilton over at PowerMizzou.com definitely expects Luther Burden to get more action from the slot this season than he did on the outside. Last season, Luther with 45 receptions for 375 yards and 6 touchdowns. Well, Gerard obviously expecting a lot more production than that, has him with 54 receptions. This is a prediction for this season. 54 catches for 723 yards and 8 scores. I think the 8 scores is probably about right, but I think I would go over. If somebody gave me 723, hey, FanDuel Sportsbook, give me that number, baby. I'll take it right now. In fact, you'd have to get well into the 800s for me to start thinking about betting against that. I think not only obviously is Burden an incredibly talented player, I think Missouri wants to get him the football too. He's sort of the face of the program at this point. He's certainly the face of Missouri's increasing efforts in name, image, and likeness, what with him having his own potato chip and all that good stuff. So I just truly, I don't think 1,000 yards is out of the question for Luther this season. Gerard's saying it's possible, but, quote, if Burden is having that type of year, I would imagine that means something went wrong in the receiver room. Either it was below average play or the group was riddled with injury. I'm not so sure I agree with that. I think Burden is talented enough to have a 1,000-yard season. as part of a really good Missouri offense. If in theory, this Missouri offense is much improved this season, let's say they're a top 30 type group or something like that. Well, I think Burden could easily have 1,000 yards again from that slot position. I think his targets are going to be going up quite a bit more than even Gerard Hamilton is expecting. But again, you know what? I can't really profit on that until FanDuel Sportsbook gets off their duffs and actually posts some player props over there. Come on, I'm willing to give you my money right now. But until then, hopefully this has satiated your love for Missouri basketball and football. I know it has mine. Thanks for joining me as always here. And again, tomorrow on the program, we're going to have some real talk about the potential for a big drop-off on the 2024 Missouri football defense. No doubt this is the year for that side of the ball to strike while the iron's hot. So just another reason this is a big upcoming 23 Missouri football campaign. But you know what? Until tomorrow, I'll see you next time right here on Locked On Mizzou.